countries in Africa that does not have a name. The other one is Central African Republic. Its nameness also in a sense that it is incognito and it makes itself invisible to the rest of Africa. Indeed, this thing called South Africa is a thing that imagines itself as a province of Europe. It's a country that culturally, epistemologically, and aesthetically disavows its African location. This thing called South Africa is not only uncomfortable with its African location, it's actually unreceptive to the rest of Africa. So in 2008, nearly 70 people were killed in South Africa in xenophobic attacks in 2008. And this was not unexpected. To be sure, out of those 68 that were killed, half of them were black South Africans. But because they were too dark, they were thought to be foreigners and they were killed. Therefore, contemporary South Africa is not only an African, it's also anti-black. This is a country that, to use Professor Louis Gordon's formulation, assigns the value of absence to the black body. At Marikana, 45 miners were killed for simply asking to be treated with respect. They were killed for simply asking this London-based mining company to stop criminal exploitation and to pay them a living wage, simply $1,000 per month. That's what they were asking for, $1,000 per month. Similar to the 2008 killings of black foreigners, no one has been charged for this massacre, let alone anyone sent to jail. As this video shows, in South Africa, black life is still cheap. It's a life of beings with questionable humanity. But this presents us with a cognitive dissonance. How can this happen? How can this be in the land of Mandela, in the land of Desmond Tutu, indeed in the land of Ubuntu? How can this be? The land that we are told has the best constitution in the whole world, we are told. South Africa has the best constitution in the whole world. So how can this happen? I want to pursue two lines of arguments here. The first argument is this. In addition to perpetuating the unhomeliness and the non-belonging that I earlier alluded to, I will show that the South Africa's post-1994 constitution instantiates a Neo-Apartheid Constitutionalism. The basic aim of this constitution is, on the one hand, to guarantee the metaphysical white world. On the other hand, this constitution aims to turn native into settlers. I'll show this. So this is the first proposal, that Neo-Apartheid Constitutionalism is about perpetuating the unholy, the non-belonging of black South African by securing the becoming of those, to use J.M. Cottier's need formulation, no longer European, but not yet African. Secondly, by fortifying this creature called South Africa and simultaneously blocking the emergence of Azania, our black decolonized utopia, Neo-Apartheid Constitutionalism does not only perpetuate apartheid or differential belonging, it perpetuates the colonialist enterprise of decoupling Africans from the world of the same. The exception here is that the preface Neo in Neo-Apartheid denotes that under this new dispensation, differential or hierarchized belonging is perpetuated through the creation of liminal figures, what we can call non-whites. So those are the two arguments. If we accept this argument, therefore the fundamental task facing genuine post-apartheid constitutionalists is therefore to end this world, to end the world that continues to expel those dislocated black into a non-world, a world of disposable human beings. Okay, let's begin with the first concept, the last concept, the concept of de-worlding, and the idea that the main objective of coloniality, not just colonialism, is to perpetuate the decoupling of Africans from the common world. As you know, the colonial world, that is the anti-black world, is underwritten by ethnocentrism of Eurocentrism, and inherent to this thinking is the idea that Africans do not belong to the world. Now, here I will cite a number of influential European theories from Hegel, Marx, Kant, etc. But perhaps I should just cite one of them, the most brilliant European philosopher on issues of appearance, natality or new beginnings, and worldliness, Hannah Arendt. Now, Hannah Arendt, in her book on the origins of totalitarianism, explaining or justifying why the Europeans colonized South Africa, has got the following to say. What made them, as the Africans, different from other human beings was not at all the color of their skin, but the fact that they behaved like part of nature, that they had not created the human world, a human reality, and that therefore nature remained in all its majesty the only overall reality, compared to which they appear to be phantoms, unreal, and ghost-like. End of quote. The most important passage in this, the most important claim in this passage is a claim, and I quote again, Africans have not created a human world, a human reality. End of quote. In these few statements, we are presented with a concise summary of how European ethnocentrism relegates Africans and other non-Western people outside the realm of the human world. To understand the significance of this, we'll have to place these claims of Hannah Arendt in her other work, and a discussion on what she calls a space of appearance, the distinction between the earth and the world, and the way that political action is the most significant human action. From work such as the human condition, on revolution, between past and present, we can summarize Hannah Arendt's philosophy as follows on this question. For Hannah Arendt, there's an essential connection between the level of capacity or willingness to fabricate things, to make things, and the world and worldlessness. Hannah Arendt argues that those who have not yet developed the capacity or desire to produce things of the world were worthless, because worldliness, and I quote, is a capacity to fabricate and to create a world. End of quote. Furthermore, falling for this, for Hannah Arendt to be worthless is to be denied reality, since the world of things is a precondition for a space of appearance. Back to South Africa. Hannah Arendt's main explanation for why the Europeans enslaved us and conquered our land is that Africans did not belong to the human world and did not belong to the world of sin. According to Hannah Arendt, the indexes of African not belonging to the world were first and foremost the fact that they had not domesticated nature and had not manufactured anything. That was Hannah Arendt. In a phrase, and I'll quote Hannah Arendt again, Africa was a dark continent where the savages were numerous enough to constitute the world of their own, the world of fully. Now, we can debate whether Hannah Arendt is a racist, or whether she's just repeating what she thought the Dutch invaders in South Africa thought, right? But from my own rereading of this narrative from the origins of totalitarianism to reading on revolution, where she mentions nothing about Haiti, or where she mentions nothing about genocide, the establishment of America, to her other work on violence, where she attacks Frantz Fanon, and where she said the appearance of black students led to the disappearance of human reality, clearly shows what Hannah Arendt thinks about black people. Anyway, as young people will say, whatever. For our own purpose, the value of Hannah Arendt's narrative of the colonization of what the settler invaders called South Africa, is that it's a narrative that is representative of the colonial discourse, a discourse that authorizes and dewares non-Europeans. It's a discourse that robs Africans of their belonging to the human world. As is well known, this is a discourse that originated in the 15th century with, on the one hand, the universalization of Eurocentrism, and on the other hand, the epistemicide of the non-European ways of perceiving the world. As Enrique Tissel and Anibal Cujano have shown, the more Europe expanded, the more the rest of the world disappeared and produced as invisible. Let's come back to South Africa. From 1657, when the Dutch East Indian Company gave permission for the permanent invasion and settlement in South Africa, to the creation of South Africa in 1910 as a white-only republic, the constitutional project in South Africa has always been about constituting a South Africa where black people are invisible, a world where black people are not at home. To achieve this deworlding of South Africa, of black people were dispossessed of their land, they were forcibly removed from the urban areas, and eventually, with the formation of the Bantustans in the 1960s, they were denationalized and declared no longer South African, but foreign natives. So South Africans were called foreign natives in South Africa. Apartheid colonialism, as a last word on white supremacy, to bastardize Derrida, was an anti-black polity that wished black people were not part of that world, a world that accidentally was at the tip of Africa. This is consistent with a polity that was constructed not as a social content, but as a racial content, as Charles Mills would put it. Indeed, as Professor Gordon has argued, and I quote, anti-black racism espouses a world that will eventually be better off without black people. End of quote. Because of time, I'm going to skip a whole lot of things and fast forward to contemporary South Africa. In making this leap with me, don't forget what I've said so far. Firstly, South Africa from its beginning was created to unhold and to deworld black people. Secondly, that today Neo-Apartheid Constitutionalism camouflages the illegitimacy of this construction called South Africa by creating non-whites, mimic figures that Homi Baba calls almost the same but not quite white. These are the post-1994 black rulers, the black bourgeois, whose money allows them to buy themselves outside of the black world and seek assimilation into the white world. It is this black assimilationist, together with the historical settlers, that continue the world where black people are a norm. Now, I want to submit that at the heart of the new South Africa is the fact that the post-1994 constitution fails to resolve the problematic of ontological difference between the natives and the settlers. I want to argue that the post-1994 Neo-Apartheid Constitutionalism maintains this Manichaean binary, and if anything, it seeks to make settler invaders natives and natives settlers. This is what the founding law of 1994 has done. In closing, let us focus on the occasion of the adoption of this founding law. In May 1996, the main negotiating partners finally reached agreement on the final constitution. The constitution was quickly seen as a birth certificate to the new South Africa. In fact, one representative captured the prevailing mood with the following proclamation, and I quote, "This is a historic day. It is a birthday to the South African Rainbow Nation. This is a day South Africa is truly born." End of quote. Now, I want to focus on a speech that was given on this day by Thabo Mbeki, the former president of South Africa. In essence, what Thabo Mbeki did, our former president, was to draw the link between the new constitution and post-apartheid belonging and becoming. The enduring brilliance of Mbeki's speech that day lies in the fact that he did not say anything about the constitutional bill or what the process of his drafting and adoption meant for constitutional democracy. Rather, Mbeki used the occasion to argue for an all-inclusive conception of Africanness. Part of his now famous speech is as follows, and I quote, "I owe my being to the Khoi and the San, they who fell victim to the most merciless genocide our native land has ever seen. I am informed by the migrants who left Europe to find a new home on our native land. Whatever their actions, they remain still part of me. I count all those who were transferred from India and China, whose being resided in the fact solely that they were able to provide physical labor." And in conclusion, Tshepo Madlingozi said, "Being part of all these people and the knowledge that none dare contest that assertion, I shall claim that I am an African." End of quote. Now, by mobilizing the various and conflicting strands of South African history, and by including every South African under the conception of African, Mbeki at once affirmed a non-nativist idea of citizenship and a non-ethnic notion of Africanness. Going forward, Africanness was no longer a matter of soil, blood, and ancestry. By including white people under the concept of African, Mbeki was intervening directly in one of the most contentious debates anti-colonial activists and intellectuals engaged in during apartheid. Simplistically put, the debate was as follows. In the post-colony, what would it take for settler invaders to become and to belong? Put differently, what would it take for settlers to become natives? This was a debate during the anti-colonial period. What Tshepo Madlingozi did with this founding document was to short-circuit the debate. Going forward, everyone was an African. I only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to skip a bit. Let's translate. Finally, for the so-called natives, the objective of the anti-colonial struggle was at one level simplistic enough. It was for the recovery of land and sovereignty in all its forms. Now, firstly, let's start with the question of land. The post-1994 Constitution includes a property clause. And this property clause therefore means that the land that was stolen in the past is transmuted into good property. The result of this is that only 8% of the land has been transferred back to the black population. And the historical injustice remains in South Africa. Secondly, for the black majority, post-apartheid becoming means retrieving their Africanness in the spiritual, epistemic, and philosophical sense. Now, 2 things here. A, without the land, there is no reversing epistemicide, for it is a land that connects us with ancestors, is a land that allows us to perform rituals and therefore to restore cosmic harmony. Without the land, we are still settlers in South Africa. B, the adoption in South Africa of what Komarov and Komarov calls a decidedly Eurocentric modern founding law, it subordinates everything African to its authority. So, for example, African law in South Africa can only be practiced if it is not in conflict with its Eurocentric constitution. Therefore, like Christianity and Western education before, this new constitution attempts to westernize the native. That is, the new constitution and its Neo-Apartheid Constitutionalism perpetuates what W.E.B. Du Bois calls double consciousness, the feeling of always measuring yourself with another's tape. Lastly, and I'll close with this, the new constitution lays down a lot of requirements for black people to become part of South Africa. No requirements for white people, but for black people, a lot of requirements for them to become part of the new South Africa. So, for example, the Constitution explicitly instructs black people to show their maturity and their readiness to become part of South Africa by letting go of hatred and vengeance. This is said explicitly in the Constitution. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission completed this biopolitical project of transmuting revolutionaries and anti-colonial activists into citizens and from citizens into victims. None of this inconvenience for the beneficiaries of apartheid. Finally, in the entire Constitution of 1996, the word Ubuntu does not feature. The word Ubuntu does not feature in this new founding law. Right? Whereas in previous 1994 Constitution, the word Ubuntu was present, in the current Constitution, Ubuntu is not present. That is, the new Constitution is founded without Ubuntu, without Africanity. This is almost like refounding and decolonizing Bolivia or Ecuador without Samacausa or without Bolivia. It's bizarre, right? The defeat of Ubuntu in the final Constitution is the final defeat of Africans. In conclusion, the post-apartheid constitutional imperative, therefore, is not transformative constitutionalism, but the deconstitutionalization of South Africa, and therefore the end of this anti-black world, a world in which black ontology remains suspect. This is an assignment that was so powerfully put down by Unisinos in 1946 in his brilliant book-length poem, appropriately titled A Notebook on the Return to the Native Land. In other words, a return from psychic, epistemological, cosmological dislocation and non-belonging to the world. Let me end by quoting one stanza, and I quote, "We do have to start. Start what? The only thing in the world worth starting. The end of the world, for heaven's sake." Thank you. Obrigado.